Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. Chapter 8. Robinson's Journal. Details of his domestic economy and contrivances. Shock of an earthquake. September 30th, 1659. I, poor miserable Robinson Crusoe, being shipwrecked during a dreadful storm in the offing, came on shore on this dismal, unfortunate island, which I called the Island of Despair, all the rest of the ship's company being drowned, and myself almost dead. All the rest of that day I spent in afflicting myself at the dismal circumstances I was brought to, viz., I had neither food, house, clothes, weapon, nor place to fly to, and in despair of any relief saw nothing but death before me, either that I should be devoured by wild beasts, murdered by savages, or starved to death for want of food. At the approach of night, I slept in a tree for fear of wild creatures, but slept soundly, though it rained all night. October 1st. In the morning, I saw to my great surprise the ship had floated with the high tide, and was driven on shore again much nearer the island, which, as it was some comfort on the one hand, for seeing her sit upright and not broken to pieces, I hoped, if the wind abated, I might get on board and get some food and necessaries out of her for my relief. So, on the other hand, it renewed my grief at the loss of my comrades, who, I imagined, if we had all stayed on board, might have saved the ship, or at least that they would not have all been drowned as they were, and that had the men been saved, we might perhaps have built us a boat out of the ruins of the ship to have carried us to some other part of the world. I spent great part of this day in perplexing myself on these things, but at length, seeing the ship almost dry, I went upon the sand as near as I could, and then swam on board. This day also it continued raining, though with no wind at all. From the 1st of October to the 24th. All these days entirely spent in many several voyages to get all I could out of the ship, which I brought on shore, every tide of flood, upon rafts. Much rain also in these days, though with some intervals of fair weather. But it seems this was the rainy season. October 20th. I overset my raft and all the goods I had got upon it, but being in shoal water, and the thing being chiefly heavy, I recovered many of them when the tide was out. October 25th. It rained all day and all night, with some gusts of wind, during which time the ship broke in pieces, the wind blowing a little harder than before, and was no more to be seen except the wreck of her, that only at low waters. I spent this day in covering and securing the goods which I had saved, that the rain might not spoil them. October 26th. I walked about the shore almost all day to find out a place to fix my habitation, greatly concerned to secure myself from an attack in the night, either from wild beasts or men. Towards night, I fixed upon a proper place under a rock and marked out a semicircle for my encampment, which I resolved to strengthen with a work, wall, or fortification made of double piles, lined within with cables and without with turf. From the 26th to the 30th, I worked very hard in carrying all my goods to my new habitation, though some part of the time it rained exceedingly hard. The 31st, in the morning, I went out into the island with my gun to seek for some food and discover the country, when I killed the she-goat, and her kid followed me home, which I afterwards killed also, because it would not feed. November 1st, I set up my tent under a rock, and lay there the first night, making it as large as I could, with stakes driven in to swing my hammock upon. November 2nd, I set up all my chests and boards and the pieces of timber which made my rafts, and with them formed a fence around me, a little within the place I had marked out for my fortification. November 3rd, I went out with my gun and killed 2 fowls like ducks, which were very good food. In the afternoon, went to work to make me a table. November 4th. This morning, I began to order my times of work, of going out with my gun, time of sleep, and time of diversion. Viz., every morning I walked out with my gun for 2 or 3 hours, if it did not rain, then employed myself to work till about 11 o'clock, then eat what I had to live on, and from 12 to 2 I lay down to sleep, the weather being excessive hot, and then in the evening to work again. The working part of this day and of the next were wholly employed in making my table, for I was yet but a very sorry workman, though time and necessity made me a complete natural mechanic soon after, and I believe it would do any one else. November 5th. This day went abroad with my gun and my dog and killed a wildcat. Her skin pretty soft, but her flesh good for nothing. Every creature I killed, I took off the skins and preserved them. Coming back by the seashore, I saw many sorts of sea fowls, which I did not understand, but was surprised and almost frightened with 2 or 3 seals, which, while I was gazing at, not well knowing what they were, got into the sea and escaped me for that time. November 6th. After my morning walk, I went to work with my table again and finished it, though not to my liking, nor was it long before I learned to mend it. November 7th. Now it began to be settled fair weather. The 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and part of the 12th, for the 11th was Sunday, I took wholly up to make me a chair, and with much ado brought it to a tolerable shape, but never to please me, and even in the making, I pulled it in pieces several times. Note, I soon neglected my keeping Sundays, for omitting my mark for them on my post, I forgot which was which. November 13th. This day it rained, which refreshed me exceedingly and cooled the earth, but it was accompanied with terrible thunder and lightning, which frightened me dreadfully for fear of my powder. As soon as it was over, I resolved to separate my stock of powder into as many little parcels as possible, that it might not be in danger. November 14th, 15th, and 16th. These 3 days I spent in making little square chests or boxes, which might hold about 1 pound or 2 pounds at most of powder, and so putting the powder in, I stowed it in places as secure and remote from one another as possible. On one of these 3 days, I killed a large bird that was good to eat, but I know not what to call it. November 17th. This day I began to dig behind my tent into the rock to make room for my further convenience. Note 3 things I want exceedingly for this work, viz., a pickaxe, a shovel, and a wheelbarrow or basket. So I desisted from my work and began to consider how to supply that want and make me some tools. As for a pickaxe, I made use of the iron crows, which were proper enough, though heavy. But the next thing was a shovel or spade. This was so absolutely necessary that, indeed, I could do nothing effectually without it. But what kind of one to make, I knew not. November 18th. The next day, in searching the woods, I found a tree of that kind, or like it, which in the Brazils they call the iron tree, for its exceeding hardness. Of this, with great labor, and almost spoiling my axe, I cut a piece, and brought it home too with difficulty enough, for it was exceedingly heavy. The excessive hardness of the wood, and having no other way, made me a long while upon this machine, for I worked it effectually, but little and little, into the form of a shovel or spade. The handle, exactly shaped like ours in England, only that the broad part having no iron shot upon it at bottom, it would not last me so long. However, it served well enough for the uses which I had occasion to put it to, but never was a shovel, I believe, made after that fashion, or so long a making. I was still deficient for want of basket or a wheelbarrow. A basket I could not make by any means, having no such thing as twigs that would bend to make wicker ware, at least none yet found out. And as to the wheelbarrow, I fancied I could make all but the wheel, but that I had no notion of, neither did I know how to go about it. Besides, I had no possible way to make the iron gudgeons for the spindle or axis of the wheel to run in, so I gave it over. And so, for carrying away the earth which I dug out of the cave, I made me a thing like a hod, which the laborers carry mortar in, when they serve the bricklayers. This was not so difficult to me as the making of the shovel. And yet this and the shovel, and the attempt which I made in vain to make a wheelbarrow, took me up no less than 4 days. I mean, always excepting my morning walk with my gun, which I seldom failed, and very seldom failed also bringing home something fit to eat. November 23rd. My other work having now stood still because of my making these tools, when they were finished, I went on, and working every day as my strength and time allowed, I spent 18 days entirely in widening and deepening my cave, that it might hold my goods commodiously. Note, during all this time, I worked to make this room or cave spacious enough to accommodate me as a warehouse or magazine, a kitchen, a dining room, and a cellar. As for my lodging, I kept to the tent, except that sometimes in the wet season of the year it rained so hard that I could not keep myself dry, which caused me afterwards to cover all my place within my pail with long poles in the form of rafters, leaning against the rock, and loading them with flags and large leaves of trees, like a thatch. December 10th. I began now to think my cave or vault finished, when on a sudden it seems I had made it too large. A great quantity of earth fell down from the top and on one side, so much that in short it frightened me, and not without reason too, for if I had been under it, I had never wanted a grave digger. Upon this disaster, I had a great deal of work to do over again, for I had the loose earth to carry out, and which was more important, I had the ceiling to prop up so that I might be sure no more would come down. December 11th. This day I went to work with it accordingly, and got 2 shores or posts pitched up right to the top, with 2 pieces of boards across over each post. This I finished the next day, and setting more posts up with the boards, in about a week more I had the roof secure, and the posts standing in rows served me for partitions to part of my house. December 17th. From this day to the 20th I placed shelves and knocked up nails in the posts to hang everything up that could be hung. And now I began to be in some order within doors. December 20th. Now I carried everything into the cave, and began to furnish my house, and set up some pieces of boards, like a dresser, to order my victuals upon. But boards began to be very scarce with me. Also, I made me another table. December 24th. Much rain all night and all day. No stirring out. December 25th. Rain all day. December 26th. No rain, and the earth much cooler than before and pleasanter. December 27th. Killed a young goat and lamed another, so that I caught it and led it home on a string. When I had it home, I bound and splintered up its leg, which was broke. N.B. I took such care of it that it lived, and the leg grew well as strong as ever. But by my nursing it so long, it grew tame, and fed upon the little green at my door, and would not go away. This was the first time that I entertained a thought of breeding up some tame creatures, and I might have food when my powder and shot was all spent. December 28th, 29th, 30th. Great heats and no breeze, so that there was no stirring abroad except in the evening for food. This time I spent in putting all my things in order within doors. January 1st. Very hot still, but I went abroad early and late with my gun, and lay still in the middle of the day. This evening, going farther into the valleys which lay toward the center of the island, I found there was plenty of goats, though exceedingly shy and hard to come at. However, I resolved to try if I could not bring my dog to hunt them down. January 2nd. Accordingly, the next day I went out with my dog and set him upon the goats. But I was mistaken, for they all faced about upon the dog, and he knew his danger too well, for he could not come near them. January 3rd. I began my fence or wall, which, being still jealous of my being attacked by somebody, I resolved to make very thick and strong. This wall being described before, I purposely omit what was said in the journal. It is sufficient to observe that I was no less time than from the 3rd of January to the 14th of April working, finishing, and perfecting this wall, though it was no more than about 24 yards in length, being a half circle from one place in the rock to another place about 8 yards from it, the door of the cave being in the center behind it. And we'll pause here and we'll continue with this chapter in the next video. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Thanks for watching. I love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.